So today we're going to start with, using watercolors. Some of you may have experience with it, but when you first start, what you're going to do is get a palette, and you can see the colors, the watercolors that I brought in actually come in tubes, and they come in cakes and a variety of different plates that you can buy. But all you do is squeeze, I usually tell students a pinky size amount, your nail of your pinky into your palette, into the little well areas. And you can probably pick as many colors as you want. I usually start with the primary colors, which are red, blue, yellow, and I put a little bit of purple and another kind of blue. But if you want to put browns, whatever you think would be suitable for your own sort of palette color scheme. And then you have the brushes. There is the flat brush, which you can see, and usually for watercolors we often start with the flat brushes, and they come in different sizes, so feel free to get the smaller size or the medium size, the bigger size, doesn't really matter. And then this average size round brush, and you can see the tip is rounded. So if you have a round brush and a flat brush, you're all set for today. So what we're going to do is start with the learning the watercolor wash template, which is how I started learning how to use watercolors. And if you kind of learn how to use the different washes, create the different washes, you will have a real fun time with basically painting anything in watercolors. So all of you have a handout, and we're going to go through the flat wash, gradated wash, simultaneous wash, and variegated wash. So I'll put this aside, and to start, we're going to do the flat wash and the gradated wash. Now with watercolors, you will have the opportunity to paint wet on dry, which basically means you're painting wet paint onto a dry surface, or wet paint on a wet surface. So the first thing we're going to do is the flat wash that is wet on dry. So this one is wet on dry, and this is wet on wet. So I'll just show you how to do that, and then we'll do one where it is the gradated wash. So to prepare your palette, what you'll need to do is to ensure that you have a nice container of clean water, and you're going to drop, drops of water into your palette. So, and usually I try not to make it too wet, because then I can go and use the dry brush techniques if I want to. So in general, you start off with a kind of a mixture of the water and the paint, and just enough so that the ferrules, or the brush area, can pick up quite a bit of paint. And obviously it depends on how saturated or how bright you want the colors to be. So the more water you mix, the lighter the values become. So I usually try to mix the colors so that they are wet enough, but not too much water so that it becomes too dull. So we'll start off with a kind of I'll start with maybe an orange. So I'm going to put a bit of yellow into this red, and so I have quite a bit of color here, just enough. So as you're mixing it, you want to try to ensure that you have enough for the area that you want to cover, so that you don't go back and then your surface might be dry, so then you need to go back to it. Okay, so right now, when you see, once you have your well of color ready to go, we are going to start with the flat wash, wet on dry. So the first thing you need to do is obviously choose your brush. I'm using a round brush, but you can use a flat brush. And what you're doing is you're applying left to right, and I think it's right to left if you're left-handed, and pulling the paint across and ensuring that you're not going backwards too much, and making an opaque layer. And as you can see, I'm trying to minimize the amount of strokes that I'm making. So that is a flat wash, so there's no gradation. And when you're doing it flat wash wet on wet, what you need to do first of all is to layer your little box, or whichever area that you want in the future when you're painting a flower or maybe a mountain or a particular shape that you want, using the wet on wet technique. All you do is you lay, you know, a clear or thin layer of water first, and then you're going to, you know, make sure that you have enough paint, you know, before you start. And this time you'll notice that the paint will move quite quickly on its own, and you're doing a wet on wet flat layer of paint, the flat wash. So if you're using watercolor paper, it will not flood as much or create what you call back runs, which means little kind of white spots that dry up in uneven places. So tapping a little bit here